Hello, my name is Mike. I am a circus performer, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about things that I wish that I knew before my first circus job. So maybe you're a recent circus school graduate, or maybe you're just someone looking to break into the circus industry and you've landed yourself your first gig. What are some things that you might not be expecting and you might need to know? Let's get into it. So let's start with before the job itself. Once it's secured, what can you do pre-job to make things as smooth and as good as possible for you? The first way in which to do this is make sure that everything that you need is already clarified on an email. Now, obviously, I don't mean write a list of demands saying, you need a mint tea 10 minutes before you go on, otherwise the gig is cancelled. Instead, I just mean basic things that you're going to need to know to do your job properly. For me, one of these things is stage size. I will say the size of the stage that I need. If it's not exact, I will ask them for measurements or floor plans or anything that will make it clear to me what I'm going to be working with. If the stage is too small for your act, for example, this is something that you should figure out before turning up to the job. So as well as this, ceiling height and height above the stage is another important one for me. I will specify what I need for different acts, and if they don't know it, at least I've said what I need, and when I turn up and it's completely different to what I've said, if it's in writing, then you have the upper hand in this scenario. So make a list for your personal acts, the things that you need the venue to have and to be in place for it to be possible for you to perform, and make sure that all of these are clarified in advance. Another big one for me is stage surface. I will specify, for example, if I'm doing sear wheel, the stage surface must be non-slip. Sometimes I leave it sort of vague, but I do make sure that they know it's important for me that the stage floor is adequate for the act. And usually I'll say I will need a period of time to test the floor in advance. Generally, I think it's a good idea to say you're going to need a run through with the music, lighting state, and replicating how it's going to be in the show before the show itself. This is a very reasonable request to just have a run through, and I don't think there's ever going to be a client that says you can't do that unless it's some very rare exception. So obviously there's a lot of points I could cover here. If you're an aerialist, obviously you have a whole checklist of things that you're going to need to check for aerial. One big point, an overarching point, is never make assumptions. Never assume that the employer knows what's going on or that they have your best interests at heart. I've been in scenarios where I've been working with someone doing aerial, they turn up to a gig and the rigging point provided is not suitable for a human to be on. And the employer has even lied and said, it is suitable, it is fine, we have documentation, but we just can't find it. Never assume anything, and I know it sounds bad, but never trust anybody. Always double check for yourself, and don't feel bad about asking something that's going to affect your life. You really have to be confident enough to put your foot down, because at the end of the day, no single gig is ever worth any sort of risk, really. Unnecessary risk, that is. So that's the first point. However much you can sort out in advance over email, do it. Make sure you have things in writing for yourself to refer back to. And as your experience goes on, you'll know more and more what you'll need and what you'll need to ask. But generally, it's not really a big email that you have to send. It's just a couple of points. I need this. I need a stage this size. I need to have a little run through for my act to work properly. I can't have this, this, and this. And that's pretty much it. Now let's talk about packing for the gig itself. What sort of things should you bring with you? Other things you can sort out before you actually turn up. Obviously, in your pack bag, you're going to need all the things for your act. So you need your costume, your equipment, any rosin or chalk or other things like this. Obviously, make sure you've got that sorted. Try and think of any issues that might come up with any of this stuff. Do you need to bring spare juggling balls, spare equipment, spare screws? Do you need to bring an alternate costume in case something goes wrong with the first one? Do you need to bring a sewing kit or other things just in case of any emergency? I like to err on the side of caution and pack more rather than less. I'm the sort of person that brings 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of shoes and stuff like this. But generally there is nothing worse than turning up and you've forgotten something. So always have a list and make sure you've got everything. With things like music, I usually bring a copy of the music on a USB, and I will also have an alternate copy just in case something doesn't work, So I usually email the music to myself so I can always check the email and get it there. Usually I have it on my iPod as well and on a USB. So I've got multiple things in case one fails. I'd bring a mirror with you just in case. You never know what sort of changing room you're going to get. Obviously, there's a huge disparity of the types of gigs. You might be in a changing room that's a performer's changing room with desks and mirrors and perfect makeup lights and stuff like that. Or you might be changing in a cupboard behind the stage. You never know really where you're going to be. But usually mirrors are one of the things that if you don't have it, you'll really notice not having it and you won't be able to put your makeup on properly. You'll have to use your phone in sort of reverse camera mode. None of this is ideal, so bring a mirror with you. Bring some food and drink. Don't assume you're getting fed. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Sometimes, even if you are, you don't necessarily want to eat a curry before you go on stage. Maybe they're going to put the food out for a certain time, then they're going to take it away. Personally, I'll always bring snacks and foods that I can survive off for that day if I don't get anything else, and also stuff that I know is going to sit well with me and I can have while I perform. In terms of clothing, I would usually plan to wear something reasonably smart to any job. You never know if you're going to be in a 5-star plus hotel or if you're just going to do a kids party. But either one, it doesn't hurt to be smarter and err on the side of smartness rather than being too casual. You don't have to wear a 3-piece suit, but just nice jeans, nice shoes. Just avoid wearing like the tracksuit and a hoodie. Again, not to say you can't do this, but if you had to choose and you're unsure, you may as well go with a smarter option. To this point, I would also consider bringing black clothes. So when you're actually in the job, you might need to go up on stage without being in costume or something like that. I would just bring black clothes because you can't go wrong with all black clothes, If you need the toilet and you're going to have to go through the main room with the guests, it's better to wear black clothes than, your sparkly costume. And a final clothing point, you're probably going to want something comfortable and warm to slip on over your costume while you're sort of waiting for your act. Obviously, it depends on the season, how cold it is, etc. But bringing a pair of tracksuits to slip up over your costume and a hoodie to go on top might be a useful thing to think about. So on the day itself, when you're arriving to the gig, first things first, obviously arrive with plenty of time. I probably don't need to go through all of the basic rules of professionalism, but once you are in the job, my general rule is to never assume that you're the center of attention and actually try and be as out the way as you can. I think it's the best practice to get what you need done to do your job properly done. And as soon as it is all out the way and you're sort of comfortable and just waiting to perform, that's when you just stay out of the way. I would say once you arrive, make it very clear about the things that you're going to need to do. Even if you've clarified over email the things that you're going to need to do when you arrive, you should make sure you clarify it again in person once you meet the client or whoever's looking after you. If you need a run through, if you need to check your music with a sound technician, etc., when you arrive, say, I need to do this, when's a good time, and just make sure that the ball is rolling in that respect. Because usually with events, there's all sorts of different things they need to do for the event itself, for the catering, for the entertainment, and you're just a small cog in this huge machine. So whatever you need to do, just say politely but forcefully, this is what I have to do, when can I do it? I would usually enter a job with low expectations for the sound and the lighting technician. This isn't to say that they're definitely not going to be good, but I wouldn't rely on them to get your cues. If you have a certain cue to turn the music on, that is slightly complicated, don't rely on them. If you can, make an act where it's just press play and then let the track run out. This is ideal, and it's the less changes that you give to people that aren't necessarily working for you and they're just sort of helping you out, the better. This is also true for rigging, heights and stuff like that. If you're working with someone for the first time on a job, try and make it as simple as possible for them, because in turn that will make it simple for you, because they're not going to make mistakes which will then reflect on you. Where this affects me the most is music cues. You know, I usually have to specify start when I'm on stage or start when I'm off stage. Usually I start when I'm off stage so I can give the DJ or the sound guy a cue and basically make sure it's going before I actually start. Another thing, when you're at the job itself, don't expect ideal conditions for warming up and for practicing and things like that. It's possible you'll be lucky and you'll have perfect space and you'll have warm temperatures and you have a soft floor, but also it's possible you might not have any of these things and you're really cramped in a tiny little room. You can't even lie on the floor and do a push-up, that sort of thing. Always assume the worst and then you're going to be surprised. If it is essential for you to have warm-up space, then you do need to clarify this in the email and make sure that's all sorted in advance. Another note on the changing situation: if you have never done a gig before, it might be a little odd to share a changing room and to not have your own privacy. This is something that you might have to get used to in the circus world, and generally as a performer, there's a lot of mixed gender changing rooms and it's usually quite unlikely that you're going to get your own space. So keep that in mind. If you really need your own room and your own privacy, consider what you can do to get this or what you will have to do if you don't have this. Are you going to need a big dressing gown to keep yourself hidden? Or are you going to need to go to the disabled toilets or things like this? But remember, you're usually just one performer out of many, and you're not necessarily there to be the center of attention. And you don't really want people to be going out of their way just for yourself, unless there's a particular circumstance. So you're at the gig, you've arrived, you're nice and smart, you've said what you needed to the client, you've done your little run through, you've given the sound person your music, the lighting state's all sorted, you're technically all sorted. Now, think about your journey from the changing room, where you're going to be, up into the stage to doing your act. Do you know the time that you need to come up? Is someone going to come and get you? Are you going to be given a warning? Is it possible that the timing is going to change throughout the night? Find out all of these things. Also, consider what special needs do you have with your prop. Do you need someone to set a prop on stage? Do you need someone to help take a prop from the changing room to near the stage? What is your journey from the changing room to doing your act? Anything that hasn't been specified, you need to think about it and specify that now. If you want someone to set your juggling balls on the stage, then you should tell them that that's what you want them to do. If you need someone to strike your equipment afterwards, you need to make sure that they know that. Even things like, if you're going to rest your steer wheel near the stage, where's the best place to rest it? And where is the best place to leave it after, so it's not going to get in anyone's way or fall over or anything like that. With aerial, if your equipment is staying on stage afterwards, when is the best time to get it down? There's always times where your act might be at 10, but you can't actually de-rig it until after the party or after the event. So you might finish at 10 and then you can't actually go home until 2 a.m. And if you don't know this in advance, that can be quite an annoying thing. So keep everything in mind like that. How are things practically going to work on the day? So on the lead up to the performance and the performance itself, first, I wouldn't necessarily expect anything to run smoothly. If you've been given a time, a start time, expect it to possibly change. If you've been through your cues and your lighting cues and your music cues, don't expect them to always get it right. And the best advice that I can give you with any of this stuff is try and be as lenient as possible within reason. If someone is delaying your start time to the point where now you're hours later than you thought you would, this is unacceptable in my opinion. You have to make each judgment somewhat depending on the situation you're in. But if someone says, oh, we're starting at 7:30, oh, actually now it's 7:25, they're not even on their main meals yet, we've got to wait another half hour before you can get the acts out. Things like this, it's probably better to just go with, because no event really runs exactly as it's planned. So yeah, I guess generally allow some leniency with how things are going to run and don't expect it to go smoothly. There might be times where you feel the music has ruined your act because it turned off halfway through. Things like this happens every now and then, and it is annoying, but at the end of the day, it's not really your fault, and there's no point in getting caught up in any of these things that are out of your control. Just think, you're going to do your job to the best of your ability. This brings me on to the next point, the performance itself. What are you going to expect? You might not be used to performing in front of a very varied crowd. Maybe you've only performed in front of circus school students before, and this is probably going to be quite different. The crowd could be screaming children, it could be drunk adults, it could be people that are barely even watching you because they're not even there to watch you. And as you get more experience, you'll learn to handle and to deal with different crowds better. My general advice for new performers, if you're, when you're new, I assume you're not going to be comfortable sort of improvising or making changes on stage. My advice to you is, when in doubt, blank it out. And what I mean by this is, if you've got someone in the audience going, "Way," or if you're getting light heckles, or even if you look out and everyone's face is just dead and they think like they're not even enjoying themselves, just forget about it, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. This is also a good sort of nerve controlling tip. None of these people will ever see you again. They don't know your name, you don't know their names, and your lives are very, very unlikely to come together at any point in the future. So it really doesn't matter what they think about you and what you do. The only thing that matters is you do what you told the client you were gonna do. So if you are on stage and you're feeling very insecure and there's someone shouting at you, "Hey, do a backflip," just ignore them. Just pretend you can't hear them. And in general, I would say the vast majority of audiences are on your side. Any completely unruly behavior usually is frowned upon by other people. There's always exceptions, but yeah, generally I do believe this. I am gonna make a bigger video about how to control nerves and stage fright. It's gonna go much more in depth about that. So if it's your first gig, even if it goes completely awfully, my first gigs didn't go particularly well. I dropped a lot of balls, and if I was to watch them back, it would probably be quite embarrassing. Don't get hung up on it. This is your first of many. If it's gonna be your career, it's your first of thousands, of tens of thousands of shows, and it's all part of the experience and the learning process. So once everything's all said and done, clean up after yourself. I would just leave straight away. And as I said, I don't try and become more of a part of an event than I am really booked to be. I guess a final point that some people touch on is, if it's a party, should you sort of stay and drink? Yes and no. The general advice is no, you should never get drunk at work or party. It's unprofessional. There are times where actually this is a way to strengthen your relationship with a client, and it could lead to future bookings. So I don't think there's a blanket rule about no, you shouldn't stay. Obviously, if you're someone that can't handle alcohol and you decide to get drunk at a job and then make a fool out of yourself, this is quite a stupid thing. But yeah, generally just try and approach things with a mature attitude. And overarchingly, just remember that the event is unlikely to be for you. You're not a paid guest, and you should remember this. Because of this, I err on the side of caution. I'm in and I'm out, but you might be a socialite that handles things like this a little differently. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope there's a few useful takeaway points for you. If there's anything that I missed that you think is a good thing to know before your first gig, let me know in the comments. I will probably be making a part 2 on this video as I think of other stuff. And I also want to dive into specifics like stage fright and things like that. So if you're interested in these topics, if you like this video, please leave me a like, subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely day.